Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m. It's time for Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla. Stay tuned for insights, impact, and inspiration right here on Channel Africa. Available on the Channel Africa app.
And it's a very good evening to you. A warm welcome. This is Africa World Hour. I am Tsepiso Makwetla. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Stay connected to Africa by watching Channel Africa. The world and the whole of the continent is where you find the international voices, faces, and perspective right here on the South African Broadcasting Corporation's Channel Africa. Watch and listen anytime. You'll find us on the Channel Africa app. That is also the SABC Plus app. We're also on audio bouquets on DSTV and OpenView. Let's start with your top stories.
1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
And we start with this. South Africa's Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure, Dean McPherson, says a thorough investigation into the collapse of a building in Johannesburg will be implemented once all the facts have been established. 9 people died when a concrete slab between the floors of a 2-story structure collapsed on Monday afternoon. McPherson says the exact cause of the incident will be revealed once the investigation is completed.
At this stage, our focus firmly remains on supporting family members. It would be premature and irresponsible to speculate on the causes of the collapse or the next steps while those are still grieving. There will be a time, Premier and Deputy Mayor, for a thorough investigation and accountability once all of the facts have been established.
And staying in South Africa, the National Prosecution Authority says the son of the late former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe, Bellarmine Mugabe, and his co-accused will face 2 additional charges, including pointing a firearm and contravention of the Immigration Act. The pair are charged with attempted murder, defeating the ends of justice, and possession of a firearm. The authority spokesperson in the Gauteng province, Magaboke Mohlotle, says the duo appeared briefly in the Alexandra Magistrates Court, where their case was postponed to Thursday.
The case against Bellarmine Mugabe and his co-accused Tobias Madonodze has been postponed by the Alexandra Magistrates Court to Thursday, 5 March 2026. The postponement will allow the state to provide the defense with confirmatory documentary evidence from the Department of Home Affairs and for the defense to obtain further instructions from their clients. The 2 face charges including attempted murder, defeating the ends of justice, possession of an unlicensed firearm and ammunition, 2 counts of pointing of a firearm, and contravention of the Immigration Act.
A family in Ghana is pleading for the safe return of their family member who was seemingly fighting in Ukraine for Russia. The family says the last time they were in contact with him was at the end of February last year, when he told them he was going for military training for 2 weeks. When the family then tried both his Ghanaian number and his Russian number, the message they got was that the number does not exist. Zakari Yakubu is a Ghanaian citizen and the brother of the man who is missing.
He left here January. He left to Qatar. So if you go to the embassy, Russia embassy right now in Ghana here, they will not find any information about him until you go to Qatar. But he went to Qatar. He left Qatar to Russia. So the tracing is very long. You don't know what to do. Our needs is that the government is tell us whether he's alive or he's gone. The family have been waiting for about a year. That we are waiting to maybe when some time will come, they will call us or something.
Further field mourners have gathered in southern Iran for the funerals of children killed in a strike on a school. Iranian state media says more than 165 girls and staff died in the attack in Minab on the first day of the U.S.-Israeli strikes. The U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said U.S. forces would not deliberately target a school. Shiva Ameli Rad is from the Iranian Teachers Trade Association.
They were all innocent. Children are children first. Any forces that responsible for this attack must be held accountable. Attacking on school is not acceptable and it should consider as a war crime.
The US is rapidly reducing the numbers of its diplomatic staff in the Gulf following that retaliatory strike from Iran. Washington has closed its embassies in Kuwait and Saudi Arabia, the latter having been attacked by 2 drones. Qatar, the United Arab Emirates and Israel also came under attack. The BBC's Barbara Plett has those details.
The U.S. Embassy in Riyadh was hit by 2 drones in the early hours of Tuesday morning. The Saudi Defense Ministry said this sparked a small fire and no one was hurt. President Trump suggested the U.S. would retaliate for the attack, but Iran appears to be expanding its assault on American allies in the region, which host U.S. military bases. It began to target energy infrastructure on Monday, with drone attacks on a major oil refinery in Saudi Arabia and liquid natural gas plants in Qatar. The Qataris say they also shot down 2 Iranian fighter jets, the first report of Iran sending warplanes to Gulf states.
And finally, India's Supreme Court is to examine a case which used fake judgments generated by artificial intelligence to settle a property dispute. The country's highest court got involved after appeals were lodged by the defendants. The BBC's Joanna Keane has those details.
The problem started last summer when a civil judge in the southern state of Andhra Pradesh cited 4 past judgments during her ruling. They were all later found to be AI-generated fakes. She said it was the first time she'd used an AI tool and she'd thought the rulings were genuine. A higher court in the state decided the error was made in good faith and the correct decision had been reached. But the Supreme Court is now taking a close look at the case, which it described as a matter of institutional concern.
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
And remember, we'd like to hear your perspective on some of the stories that we're covering. +27 63 406 996. That's the hotline number that you can send your thoughts to. That's on WhatsApp. And you can also speak to us on other social media platforms, Facebook, X, as well as TikTok and Instagram at Channel Africa 1. The government of South Africa has called on the company responsible for the construction of a building that collapsed on Monday in Johannesburg, killing 9 people, to take accountability. The incident happened in the afternoon when a concrete slab gave way, burying workers beneath the rubble. The case has now been handed over to the South African Police Service, who are investigating alongside engineers to determine the cause of the collapse. The developer says an independent investigation into the cause of the incident is currently underway. Luyanda Danga reports.
Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure Dean McPherson says gaps in oversight and compliance often emerge with system fail to operate properly. He has called on the company responsible for constructing the building, New Order IMV, to come forward and take accountability.
When these systems do not operate in a fully coordinated manner, gaps emerge in oversight, compliance, and accountability, particularly where unlawful construction occurs or where buildings are occupied without approval. With that being said, I want to call on the company that constructed this building, New Order INV, to come forward and to take accountability for what has gone on here, or if any member of the public knows where the owner of this company is, to immediately contact the SAPS or local law enforcement.
City of Johannesburg Executive Mayor Dada Morero has admitted that lawlessness within the city contributed to the tragedy. He says the structure was built in contravention of the city's bylaws and may be demolished once a full assessment report has been finalized.
They should have followed the bylaws of the city. You are not supposed to build in this particular area. In fact, so the city is likely to take a decision once we have assessed the whole report, that we will take steps to demolish the structure because it's in non-compliance with our bylaws.
Meanwhile, the Department of Employment and Labour says it will provide support to affected families through the compensation fund where applicable. Deputy Minister Jomo Sibiya says information received indicates that contractors linked to the site are registered with relevant compensation structure, which will assist in processing claims.
And we found that the main contractor is registered with the FEM, and the other two subcontractors are registered with us in compensation fund, which will also assist in assisting the families and also paying compensation where it's due and where it's necessary. And we can say that we've picked up as well that there are issues of those who are non-South Africans who are part of the deceased.
Authorities say investigations are ongoing as search and rescue recovery operation conclude at the site. The site has been formally handed over to the police and an inquest docket has been opened. For SABC News, I'm Luyanda Danga in Johannesburg.
And at 11 minutes past 9, now we go to our top story and we look at what's happening in the Middle East, the map of the Middle East being redrawn by fire and regional fallout. What began as targeted US-Israeli strikes on Iran has now transformed into a sprawling regional conflagration that shows no signs of slowing down, with over 500 locations struck across 153 Iranian cities. Tehran is no longer just aiming at military targets. The global consequences are hitting home faster than many anticipated. For a look at whether this is the beginning of a total regional collapse and if there is still a path to the exit ramp, diplomacy, if at all, we are joined now by Mitchell Plitnick, a Middle East political analyst, to focus on the Israel-Iran dynamics, what is happening at the moment. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Sure thing. Thank you for having me.
Let's just start with the geographical expansion of the tensions and the military escalation. What does it really mean that the war has expanded beyond Iran and Israel and now hitting Lebanon, the Gulf states, and civilian infrastructure?
Well, I mean, anyone looking at this before it started should have considered this inevitable. Iran's strategy is not a secret. They warned the United States and Israel what would happen if they came under attack. Iran considers this, and I think rightfully so, an existential war. I think they see this as a war for their very survival, at least the survival of the government. And so, they're responding in the ways that they can. They said beforehand that they would go after America's allies in the region, and I think that is, that's what they've done. On the flip side, I think we always knew that Hezbollah and other forces in the region that are partnered with Iran would support the Iranian government, and Hezbollah has already started that. The Houthis or Ansar Allah in Yemen are very likely to follow suit, and we've yet to hear from the various militias in places like chiefly Iraq, but also Syria and other places around the region that are loyal to Iran, or at least, if not loyal, certainly partnered with Iran. Given that their spiritual leader, Ali Khamenei, who was the supreme leader of Iran, has now been assassinated, I would imagine that they are ready to also join in the fray. So this is going to get worse before it gets better, and it does not seem like either the United States or Israel is seeking an off-ramp.
We'll look at Lebanon and the fact that it's ordered Hezbollah to hand over weapons while the Israeli strikes there intensify. But I just want to continue looking at, with Iran striking U.S. embassies and also energy targets across the Gulf, is this the first time that we've seen such a deliberate regional escalation?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that, and I think that it is a very unfortunate development. Iran had been moving closer; it had been mending fences with a lot of the countries in the Gulf, and I think there was a real horizon, certainly a long-term horizon, but a real horizon that might have seen a lot more cooperation between the Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC, and Iran in the long run. And that's obviously been set very far back now. So I think that is going to change things. I think there's also going to be a profound change in the strategic thinking of the Gulf countries, not just in identifying Iran as maybe as much of a threat as they used to think of it as, but also questioning whether the United States is really the strategy of counting on U.S. protection is really a viable one. The bases in those countries are what make those countries a target for Iran. It's why Iran went ahead and one can debate the legitimacy of it, but that's why Iran went ahead and attacked those countries. And I think those countries are also noticing that the United States has moved largely to protect their own bases and to protect Israel, and has done comparatively little to protect the Gulf countries. They've done something. I'm not trying to say they've done nothing, but compared to what they've done to try to protect Israel, which is obviously farther away, it has not been as much. And I'm thinking that when the smoke clears, which may be a while, but when the smoke clears, I think those countries are going to reconsider their strategic alliances.
And you spoke about Iran's regional position and how it's viewed, and I'm just wondering, with Iran also hitting airports, ports, civilian infrastructure in the surrounding areas, how capable are Gulf states like Qatar, the UAE and Bahrain in just warding off some of those drone and missile attacks?
Well, they do have the weapons provided them by the United States. They have defensive weapons, and they have actually intercepted quite a few Iranian missiles and drones. So they're certainly not helpless. On the other hand, they are limited. They only have a certain amount. They have to be economical on how they use them. They can't just shoot them into the air at a furious clip, because they'll run out. So I think that their vulnerability is real, and I think again that comes back to why is Iran doing this? Iran's calculation, and again, you hate to talk about it in such cold terms, but they're not wrong in saying if they want to survive, they have got to raise the cost of attacking them to the United States and to Israel. And the way they're going to do that is by attacking American allies. They can't win a straight up fight with the U.S. or with Israel, but they can make the cost of that war higher by attacking the other Gulf countries, by closing the Straits of Hormuz, and essentially sending the global economy into crisis eventually if this goes on long enough.
And we'll look at the economic aspects in just a moment, but I want to go back to, as we mentioned, that Lebanon has made the demand that Hezbollah needs to disarm. But how do you anticipate Hezbollah will then respond to this? And as you mentioned, as allies of Iran, how would they then escalate?
I think Hezbollah certainly does not have the capacity that it had a year and a half ago before their own intense conflict with Israel. And I think you're seeing really, for the most part, what Hezbollah right now is capable of doing. They may have agents within other countries that may take their own initiatives or launch attacks. But I think this is most of what you're going to see from them. And Hezbollah is doing this at a great cost to themselves, because while the Lebanese government is not really capable of forcing Hezbollah to disarm, this action drags Lebanon into this war, a war that most Lebanese do not want to be involved in. They may sympathize with the people of Iran, but they do not want to be involved in this war. And Hezbollah unilaterally made the decision to involve them. So this is going to make Hezbollah even more unpopular in Lebanon. So they are they have to be, I think, very careful about how they proceed. Constant escalation is only going to make things worse for them. Ultimately, they are a Lebanese organization, and they are getting more and more unpopular in their own country.
And just the fact that there are civilian casualties that are mounting not only in Iran, but in Lebanon and the UAE. You mentioned the issue of the strategic calculus for all sides, but what about the optics?
I'm sorry, what about the
optics of the fact that there are civilian casualties, and that's not only in Iran, but in Lebanon and the UAE?
Sure. The optics are bad for everyone, I think. Certainly they are bad in the Gulf countries, in the UAE and other Gulf countries. That makes Iran look worse. There are, obviously, the killing of civilians is intolerable for everyone. But the war started, right, with a joint U.S.-Israeli strike that killed over 150 schoolgirls in Iran. So I think right now, I think when we're examining the optics, why, everybody in each country will dislike the other side, the side that's bombing them. But I think for the rest of the world, the U.S. and Israel are not coming off looking great here. And they are coming off looking, I think, even worse than Iran in this circumstance. So if we're just talking about that optics in that sense, I think the war has not gone well for the U.S. and Israel. It has started, it started off in a really bad place. They've also bombed a football stadium. They bombed a hospital. And, of course, in Israel, a synagogue was bombed by Iran. So this is warfare now in the 20th century, where it's not happening on the ground, and when you're doing it from the air, civilian sites are going to get hit. It is inevitable, even with the most precise weapons. Certainly, with less precise ones, which both, but certainly Iran has to lean on to some degree, because they have a limited amount of the most precise weapons and the most powerful weapons that they have.
Now, back to the energy markets and the global impact. The Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed. The LNG and oil exports are cut. What does this mean for global energy security? I mean, we see that in Europe, gas prices are already up by 30%. India is facing supply cuts, and China is scaling back refining.
Mm-hmm. The real issue, I think, here is how much impact those things are going to have, especially on the United States. The United States is capable of maintaining lower gas prices because of our own strategic reserves, but we've depleted those in the past, just recently in the past few years for just that reason. So I think there's a limit, I think, to how far we can go. But clearly, this is the Iranian strategy. The idea, and this is, as I mentioned, they have no hope of winning a one-on-one war with either the United States or Israel, much less the two combined. So they have to find a way, as I said, to make this more costly. This is the strategy, and it's a good, it is a sound strategy. Clearly, Europe is going to feel the hit of this. Clearly, the rest of the world in Asia and in Africa, everyone is going to feel the hit of rising energy prices, and it's happening fast. I think one of the things that has been surprising, at least from the perspective of American decision makers, is how quickly Iran has been able to create this problem. I think they thought it would take them a little longer. I think they thought that Iran itself might hesitate to sort of go all out on these, which was a grave miscalculation, because again, Iran approaches this as an existential war, and I don't think the United States, Israel may have anticipated that, but I don't think the United States did. And so we're seeing, I think, a quicker rise in energy prices than the U.S. expected. It's already affecting the things that Donald Trump cares about, like the stock market and the Dow Industrial Average. And so that it's a question of how long he's willing to weather that, given that his bungling of the American economy has already cost him considerable support among his base here at home.
And just with the added effect of disruptions in global inflation, which is likely, highly likely, obviously, could that trigger a long-term geopolitical alignment, particularly between the US, the Middle East and Asia, but also impact on energy policies in some of these strategic countries? And I'm also thinking about the domestic politics in the US. What would Congress, for instance, want to push for as a result?
I think Congress remains more or less supportive of the war effort, but that support is very shaky. There is definitely dissent. Many Democrats disagree with the decision. Too many of them do so on technical grounds, which means if the technical issues are cleared up and they actually get to decide war or not war, too many of them, I think, will go over to the yes to war side. But having said that, as the economy gets hit harder and harder, more and more dissent will grow. According to the latest poll, only about 1 in 4 Americans support this war. So I think, domestically, I think the Trump administration is on shaky ground. But unfortunately, the Trump administration especially this time around, has shown itself not to be very responsive to public opinion. Now, global opinion, especially global opinion, the opinion of the people that Trump respects, which are generally the wealthy corporations and a few heads of state, those people are going to get more and more concerned as this drags on. I don't see this coming out in favor of the United States. For all the support that we've heard from Europe and other places, I think they are wise enough to understand that, for whatever reason that they're voicing their public support in private, they have to understand that this was a very reckless decision, one that the United States took without considering the effects on its partners in the Gulf, let alone its allies around the world. So I think if we're going to see a realignment, what I think we're going to see going forward is less reliance on the United States, less empowering of the United States, and new ways for Europe and the Arab world as well to find ways to act independently of the United States, so that the United States, while it will always be a key partner, a key market, a key source of military support, will have less leverage.
Mitchell, thank you so much for speaking to us and sharing your insights. Mitchell Plutnik is a Middle East political analyst, giving us his views on the latest developments on what is happening in the Middle East at the moment. It brings the time to 27 minutes past 9.
6 decades of rhythm, resonance, and relevance. We are Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Let's just do it.
Your life just got easier. Get the Channel Africa app and take us wherever you go. Catch the latest news, enjoy your favorite shows, stream the music you love, and stay connected to the continent. All in one spot, right in your pocket. Simple, quick, and always with you. The Channel Africa app. Download it now on iOS and Android. Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
At 28 minutes past 9, you are listening to Africa World Hour. I am Tsepiso Makwetla. Thank you so much for joining us. Remember that you can stream us live on Facebook and YouTube at Channel Africa 1. We are also on the DSTV Audio UK 802. Motorists can expect to pay more at the pump as fuel prices are set to increase from the 4th of March amid highly volatile geopolitical situation in the Middle East. The Department of Energy Affairs in South Africa says a spike in the fuel price as a consequence of last month's Brent crude oil increase, a strong rand-dollar exchange, as well as geopolitical uncertainty over the US and Iran war. Naledi Mabitsela Ngobo reports.
The Department of Mineral and Petroleum Resources has warned that rising geopolitical tensions may lead to an extended closure of the Strait of Hormuz, a critical Brent crude oil supply route. The Strait of Hormuz handles more than 20% of global and gas trade. The department said factors contributing to the current fuel price jump are based on February's developments, including higher Brent crude oil prices on the back of rising shipping rates and geopolitical uncertainty, among others. The department's Robert Make elaborates.
The reason for this adjustment are the higher Brent crude oil prices on average due to tension between USA and Iran during the period under review. The average international product prices followed the increasing trend of the oil prices. The rand continued to strengthen against the US dollar and cushioned the fuel prices by close to 20 cents per litre. The slate levy remains unchanged at 0 cents per litre in the price structures of both petrol and diesel.
The fuel price increase is expected to add a marginal increase to the local inflation rate. However, persistent high oil prices and a weak rand-dollar exchange on the back of geopolitical tensions may result in higher inflation of around 0.4%. Chief economist at Investec, Annabelle Bishop, explains.
Even so, we would not expect to see the Reserve Bank hike interest rates. They would likely to look through this impact. And of course, as well, we do find that the recent jump in the oil price has actually seen some moderation. Dollar and, of course, some improvement in the rand as well, back towards 16 rand to the US dollar. So CPI inflation was at 3.5% in the latest print and was in any case expected to drop down towards 3% in the month of February due to high base effects from the year ago. This will also help moderate inflation. Globally, of course, the jump in the oil price and will depend very much on how long it persists. For international fuel price effects, the US has communicated that it will continue to strike Iran, but of course there's also uncertainty, and that's impacted global financial markets, and there's likely to be volatility.
The price of Brent crude oil jumped by more than 8.5% on Monday to reach around $79 per barrel. I'm Naledi Mabitsela Ngobo in Johannesburg.
And it is now 28 minutes to 10. So as the military strikes between the United States and Israel and Iran intensify on the ground, a parallel war is being waged in the palm of your hand. Over the last 72 hours, social media has been flooded with a wave of unvetted comment and content from AI-generated videos of Iranian jets over Dubai, garnering over 200 million views, to recycled footage from decade-old chemical explosions that are being passed off as fresh strikes on Tel Aviv. So from deep fake imagery to hacking groups, the war in the Middle East comes at the very height of image manipulation. But how can we separate genuine reporting from wartime propaganda? This is a question that we ask. We pose it to CEO of Decode Communications, Lorato Tsenking. A very good evening to you, Lorato. Apologies for that, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good evening, Tsepiso, and good evening to the listeners. Thank you for hosting me.
I mean, we've seen the fact that the conflict has spread across the region, and with the mounting civilian casualties and the economic impact that we've already seen on this, just how important does social media then become, not only in shaping the perspective of what is happening on the ground, but also internationally?
So, Tsepiso, there are a couple of things, right? So, one, there's a company called Edelman. They put out a report every January called the Trust Barometer. And in there, they survey around, I think, about 28 markets across the world, and looking at government, business, civil society, and media. Interestingly, almost year on year, traditional media is becoming the least or one of the least trusted sources of information, or at least if you're looking at the four, right? So government always being the least trusted, right? And that is the first part of the worry, that if people like yourselves who, have gone to school to study and are doing this as a craft, and we're being not as trusted. The question is, where do consumers of content and information and news get their information, and what does it mean around trust? And of course, now we're seeing a high consumption of social media, particularly video first kind of content. We are now seeing that peer-to-peer sharing of information, a lot of platforms such as chat groups such as WhatsApp, they become circles of trust. And what is most worrisome is that there are then also circles where the information is passed far too many times and people almost not asking the questions. And that is where now, those who are purveyors of misinformation and disinformation literally find armament.
And just to give you an example of something that I saw on X today, a username who calls themselves Vladimir Putin, and there's a picture of Putin at on the profile picture. And the statement there is that Russia has declared war on the United States. And you can see a lot of people asking the question, why is that? Is it true? Etc., etc. But I think what it really points to is the speed and accessibility of, deep fakes, but also generative AI, how it changes images. The fact that you had that video of an attack on Dubai from what happened in 2015 in Tel Aviv. So are people aware that there is a huge danger of really falling into somebody's misinformation, information battlefield, so to speak?
I believe that to an extent people are aware, Tsepiso. So if you just go back 6 years ago at the height of the public health crisis, right, the biggest challenge that we had was really around, what misinformation and disinformation was doing, where there was fear and pandemonia around people dying everywhere else, and right, and to a great extent, governments and authoritative, organizations with authority were able to almost in a very quick way, find a way of curbing that. The difference between that period and now is that one, and as you point out, generative AI has evolved a lot quicker. Previously, say if you take 2020, you literally needed to have some good skills of Photoshop for you to manipulate an image. Now in 2026, you just need to give a voice command to an application, and it does that, and it generates that kind of the kind of image that you're looking for. Make it even worse. Now, previously it used to be a little bit costly for you to be able to remove the watermarks that indicate that a video was generated by AI. There are a couple of pirate applications that then enable people to, and again to your point around how generative AI is literally now becoming the problem in that way that previously you could, people could see with the watermarks. Now you don't even have to pay a cent for you to be able to remove that. And that is the thing that creates this video of the Burj Khalifa that was, struck down, which was eventually found that it was a fake after being seen by close to 200 million or million users on the internet. That is close to 3 times the South African population.
Are we losing the technical ability to fact check in real time?
So I think we are losing it in the sense that generative, or at least generative AI and where it is now, and its evolution is a lot quicker, is a lot faster than everyone else who's trying to almost play catch up. So if you think about the fact checkers, a lot of them are now using technology to do fact checking. And even if you look at this video that you made the example about with the Burj Khalifa being bombed, or even the other one, which was the second video that made the rounds a lot, was Tel Aviv being bombed by Iranian fighter aircraft, right? And you realize that the war is not lost in the sense that at some point the truth comes out to say this was a manipulated footage, whether it was a footage of the old that was manipulated or it was a completely new AI generated footage. And I guess then the question, or at least the one question that we should then be thinking a lot about is, what of the technology providers, big tech, should be at the forefront of one, recognizing that just as there's a good that comes with this technology, they should therefore be putting in mechanisms and guardrails to ensure that they can curb this a lot more quicker and not leave it to, some independent NGOs, organizations whose jobs is just fact checking.
So I want to talk about community notes, the model. Is it sufficient enough for a high velocity military crisis?
It can be, and particularly because it's in the hands of big tech, right? So if you think about community nodes, particularly with X, this is a platform that is owned and run by somebody who for a very long time contributed to the lies about South Africa having white genocide and white people being persecuted in South Africa. And of course, there have been a couple of reports, both on the continent and particularly in West Europe, where around how Grok in particular has been caught out to be on the wrong side of what it is meant to do. And of course, the advantage with community nodes is that while you and I can be able to, tag a particular piece of information to be a misinformation or disinformation, it almost requires some sort of a lot more people to confirm that. And therefore, it means that if there's 20 of us and maybe only 15 are going to catch that video 2 days later, that is 2 days too late. Right? Considering that sometimes this may lead to, persecution of people, sometimes this may lead to loss of lives, or it could have actually led to, if it was caught earlier, it could have led to, saving and preserving life. So community nodes is only as good as, if we are working more in a rudimentary technology time. But now with the speed of information, it is not good enough, Tsepiso.
And I want to talk about that, the fact that platforms like X, for instance, they've been flagged for, their culpability in, spreading disinformation, spreading quickly, and particularly amid conflict. What responsibility do they carry, and are there mechanisms to hold them accountable? Because if it is known, surely one would expect that there would be safeguards, or a better, monitoring of these platforms and the rules.
In certain jurisdictions, it works. So, for instance, if you consider the EU, right, from a regulatory point of view, to a great extent, they are able to work as a bloc to deal with particularly, big tech. But if you come to the continent, all the 54 jurisdictions, depend on their own local legal means, regulation, to be able to deal with a lot of this. And again, the other disparity. So if you observe in particularly in Europe, you'd find that NX would have some presence in some of the countries, whereas in South Africa, or rather on the continent, X is only headquartered in Ghana, right? And where they don't have a presence, they can do like what they did, where the South African National Editors Forum had taken, big tech to the competition commission, or to the department that deals with trade, industry, and competition. And X could literally just say, we are not going to pitch to that to that forum. There is a forum of accountability, and therefore the question that you are asking is the accountability mechanisms, right? One, when they are there, are they enough or strong enough to be able to get an X to the point where they can be accountable? Of course, we've seen in Brazil where there was a point where the government of Brazil decided that we are going to shut you down. If you're not going to be compliant, we are going to shut you down. And when they realized that the market is too huge for them not to operate, and them as in X, they decided to comply. And I guess that is the biggest thing there.
Loretta, I need to ask you a quick and final question, and it's an important one, though, and that is there's accountability. We know governments and combatants have a stake in building a narrative that suits them. But how do analysts, for instance, such as yourself, differentiate between strategic messaging and propaganda?
Oftentimes, there are patterns that we look at, right? And you can almost tell. So, for instance, now, one of the first things, if you're asking me if you're my client, I would say we need to quickly check the status of the purveyors of some of the information. You are likely to find that there are chat bots that are being used to put out this information, clickbaiting users, and the users just grab the information and share it, right? So there are a couple of patterns that we look at, but in this age of generative AI, unfortunately, it is not as apparent to the naked eye. You need, to a great extent, to also use cyber tools to ensure that you are able to pick those patterns.
Loretta, thank you so much for speaking to us on a very important subject, because a lot of people do rely on social media for their information, especially in situations like this, the latest on what is happening in the Middle East. Loretta is the CEO of Decode Communications. Loretta Tsenkeng. It brings the time to 14 minutes to 10.
Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Tamo Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. Enjoy the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
The whole population of Africa has been shocked to the depth of its soul.
For 60 years, Channel Africa has been the voice that connects the continent, telling our stories and sharing our vision with the world. This year, we mark 6 decades of broadcast excellence.
60 years of stories, sound, and connection.
6 years of African conversations that matter.
This is 60 years of broadcast excellence.
Broadcast excellence, rooted in Africa's heartbeat and looking boldly into the future. Join Channel Africa as we celebrate 60 years of broadcasting. Still strong, still vibrant, and still giving you the African perspective.
Africa.
Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
It is now 12 minutes to 10 as the world commemorates World Hearing Day. The University of Pretoria in South Africa has announced its partnership with the HearX Foundation to launch the latest evolution of the ears teacher training program. The fully automated AI-powered hearing health training tool is delivered via WhatsApp and is available free of charge to educators at every level from preschool to secondary. The discussion we continue now with Professor Davet Swanepoel from the University of Pretoria's World Health Organization Collaborating Center for the Prevention of Deafness and Hearing Loss. A very good evening to you, Professor, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good evening. It's good to be with you.
Just tell us a little bit more about the work that you do, how long you've been doing it, and basically what has been its impact.
Yes, so we've started this work 2 years ago, 2 to 3 years ago, to really see how we can get awareness and training and advocacy into the hands of teachers, but also early childhood development facilitators in a way that's available to them, that's accessible, that doesn't take too much of their time, that they can use on their own mobile phones. That's why we selected WhatsApp as the avenue to deliver this service. And we're really proud to kind of release the second iteration of this program today on World Hearing Day to align with the WHO theme. And now we've got a fully automated AI-assisted WhatsApp training program that any teacher and preschool worker can subscribe to. It takes 4 days, 5 minutes per day, and then they get a certificate of completion. We measure the impact of the knowledge change as well. So it's really a totally digital, scalable solution that also provides them access to an AI agent for any questions they may have.
And I want to hear a little bit more about the tool, the training tool itself. What does it do? I mean, given the stats, I believe it's 90 million children and adolescents that live with hearing loss or hearing impairment. Is this, enough, or can there be more added to dealing with people with hearing impairments?
Yes, so globally, 90 million children 5 years to 19 years of age living with hearing loss. But for younger kids between 0 and 5 years, they typically, it's about 3 in 100 kids in Africa are going to have a hearing problem every year. And, healthy hearing is the gateway to healthy learning. So if kids can't hear well, they can't learn well. It's an invisible condition. So you can't see that someone has a hearing problem, except in these educational settings where children are trying to learn, trying to listen. So teachers are the gatekeepers who can really identify a hearing problem early on if they've got the right training. And if we can identify it early, we can do something about it that can really change the total trajectory of children's educational careers, but also vocational outcomes and ultimately quality of life and integration into society and communities.
So just in terms of the right person or the right educator to do hearing training, do you need to have hearing impairment yourself in order to relate to the struggles of somebody who does? What makes you a good candidate for, using and applying this hearing training tool?
Yeah, so our goal is that every teacher in primary schools, every teacher in early childhood development centers should run through this program. It literally runs for 4 days. It's at your convenience. It takes about 5 minutes per day. You get a little infographic. There's a voice note of about 2 minutes that accompany it. And if there's any questions around the program, they can directly interact with an AI agent that we train on the latest evidence on the importance of hearing for education, but also how do you identify hearing problems in children, and what do you do once a child's identified with a hearing difficulty in terms of sending them to the right follow-up services, but also there's really practical changes that you can make right there and then in a classroom or a school-based setting that's going to help these kids significantly.
And how can teachers access this ear training program? And I'm just wondering also about the cost of it.
Yeah, so those are great questions. So the reality is that this program is being offered totally free of charge. So anyone can subscribe to the program. There's no cost. You literally just need to WhatsApp a specific number. And we're really pleased to see already on this World Hearing Day that there's a couple of thousand of teachers that have already subscribed and started with this training program. So there's a WhatsApp number that you just send a message to, and that way you can subscribe.
And what is that WhatsApp number?
So the number is 087 813 4013. Let me repeat that. The number is 087 813 4013. And you just type the word ears. So that's just the plural ears to that number, and that starts the program, and you're enrolled. And everyone who finishes the program gets an official certificate of completion from the Eurex Foundation in partnership with the University of Pretoria, which is a WHO collaborating center.
Professor, thank you so much for your time. Professor Devet Swanepoel from the University of Pretoria's World Health Organization Collaborating Center for the Prevention of Deafness and Hearing Loss, and who's speaking to us about World Hearing Day as well.
When the sun goes down, we don't stop the talk. Channel Africa, the best nighttime radio.
And finally, we end with this. South Africa's proposed national health insurance continues to spark debate as the country moves towards universal health coverage. The Human Sciences Research Council has hosted a webinar bringing together policymakers, researchers and global health experts to unpack progress, challenges and what lies ahead for the NHI. Our reporter Lebogang Mabange has this report.
Experts say open dialogue and collaboration are essential as South Africa works to transform its healthcare system. Speaking during the webinar, Human Sciences Research Council Divisional Executive Professor Kangelani Zuma highlighted the tough questions the country must confront as the reform unfolds.
The complexities around national health insurance reform demands that we confront difficult questions with honesty. Some of the questions that we should be confronting with honesty, it's how do we ensure equitable access without compromising quality? How do we secure sustainable financing in a constrained fiscal environment like the one we have in our country? How do we strengthen governance, accountability, and institutional capacity? And the fourth one is, how do we build public trust during a period of significant transformation?
Delivering the keynote address, Deputy Director General for NHI at the National Department of Health, Professor Nicholas Crisp, explained that the goal of the NHI is to simplify the health system while ensuring everyone has access to care.
So what we are trying to achieve is to simplify our health system and create universality. And what the Act does is that it creates a single fund where we will pool our resources and make sure that that fund has the administrative capabilities to pay for our healthcare when we need it. The fund is given responsibilities. First of all, it gets a board as the accounting authority, but it also has a number of other structures responsible for designing the benefits and benefits payments and managing and monitoring and making sure that this money is spent properly to make sure we get healthcare. So it must monitor quality, outcomes, etc.
The global perspective was also part of the discussion. Acting Director for Universal Health Coverage and Life Course at the World Health Organization, Dr. Ogochukwu Chukwujeku, outlined recent changes in how universal health coverage is measured.
In 2025, there were some changes made to the underlying indicators that are used to monitor UHC. The first one on the service coverage index, the core of it hasn't changed, but there were just a few tweaks to 3 of the tracer indicators to reflect indicators that countries have more data on, including family planning, workforce, and managing diabetes. And these were also to bring them more in line with the other SDG measures. that exist.
Dr. Jukujeku says that there has been gradual progress in expanding access to healthcare and reducing financial hardship. However, she cautions that the pace of improvement suggests many countries may struggle to meet the universal health coverage targets set for 2030.
In Africa, our service coverage has increased over the past 2 decades, from about 30 to nearly to about 41 as of 2023. And financial hardship, which is the proportion of population facing hardship, has also reduced from 45% to about 35%. But seeing this 10% reduction in 20 years means that we will not be where we need to be by 2030 for sure.
Participants at the webinar say continued engagement between government, researchers and international partners will be key to strengthening the path toward universal health coverage in South Africa. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And that's how we come to the end of Africa World Hour. But before we go, Shayla and Tukumana is in the studio, and you'll do much better than the whisper.
What
shall we call it? The radio whisperer.
Please don't. Ma'am, what's going on with the voice?
Ish, man, kuningi. Just in a lot of pain today, but but yeah, we're here. We made it.
Alive with possibilities, yes?
So,
all right.
How are you doing?
You know what? Let's focus on the show. I think that's better to focus on. In the first hour of the show, we speak to Henrietta Kupe, who's a social worker, as well as the supervisor at Lifeline Mental and Emotional Health for All. And essentially, we're looking at essentially the progress around mental health facilities and support with GBV survivors. And then the second hour of the show, we speak to Nonkululeko Mbuli, who's an advocacy and communications strategist at Embrace Movement for Mothers. And we are joined by Nonkululeko to discuss the obstetric violence and the memorandum that was addressed to the Minister of Health, Aaron Motsoaledi. And essentially, there is a plea to end this kind of violence. And this includes a myriad of things: privacy, dignity, forced procedures, you name it. And this is for both public and private.
As I should think about that, the scandal around forced hysterectomies that did the rounds, and I believe some of that is still going on.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Shayla. You have a good one.
I will. You have a better one, please.
I have a better. All right, thank you. And it's good night from us.
Conversations that touch the heart and inspire change.